Okay, here we go. Hi, everyone. Peace, shalom. I hope everybody's having great holidays with Passover and Easter continues from here. And of course, Ramadan is still in full swing. I am not Sophia Said. My name is Sandy Watson. I'm the administrator here at the Interfaith Center. The Interfaith Center is one of the sponsors of this, and we are, for those that do not know who we are a nonprofit organization here in Little Rock, and we're committed to reducing the fear and hatred among different world religions. We do that through educating people about other people's religions, promoting interfaith dialogue, and providing relationship building opportunities. This is the session 5 of the spring session, and it is co-sponsored also by the Cobb Institute. It is named in honor of their founder, John Cobb. And the Institute is inspired by the knowledge that all life is interconnectional. Our spring session is also co-sponsored by Process and Faith. They offer workshops, learning circles, featuring faith leaders from different traditions who share insights concerning what it means to be a whole person. Spirituality and Practice website, you can go there, and that is where our text and resources come from. And you're welcome to get on there and look and see more information. More than welcome to do that. Our moderator today is Dr. J. McDaniel. He is our teacher and our moderator. He is a distinguished professor of world religions. He has taught for 30 years at Hendrix College in Conway, helping students understand how people live and think in different parts of the world where they can be shaped by religions and religious viewpoints. With expertise in Buddhism, process and philosophy, constructive theology, interfaith dialogue, spirituality in the age of consumerism. That is a tall order, Dr. McDaniel, to do all that in this world. Jay has been leading our exploration classes, helping students develop philosophies and theologies of their own. Our letters today are M for meaning and N for nurturing. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. J. McDaniel right now.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm glad to see you. Now, I have bad news, and that is that Sophia will not be with us today because she's in flight. I think she's on her way to Little Rock. I'm not sure. But she let me know a couple of days ago she wouldn't be with us. So I want to say, if you want to opt out right now, I'm half thinking about doing it myself. But I will proceed. Sophia and I decided that we wanted to choose letters from the alphabet that we had not explored before. So that's why the letters that we pick each time. And so today is M for meaning and N for nurturance. And I need you to know that last night when I went out to dinner with my wife, I turned to her and I said, Kathy, what do you think of meaning? And we probably talked for about 20 minutes, and neither of us really could define it satisfactorily. So I thought, oh my gosh, am I in trouble here? But I have given it some thought, so I'll give it my best. I'll start with saying that one of the books that I used in teaching college over the years that really had an impact on me as well as my students was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And I don't know if any of you have read that book. It's a fantastic book. It's about his experiences in a concentration camp, and also about he develops a form of therapy out of that. But one thing he noted in the concentration camp where he was that people that survived that terrible experience would choose one thing to do each day, which became their purpose for that day. And they had a sense of purpose. And by contrast, people who just wished that they could be happy didn't survive. So he developed the idea that having some sense of purpose, even on a daily basis, is really what gives people the oomph to survive. And in that book, he also made a very interesting suggestion. It's that happiness is a byproduct of the search for meaning. Happiness may or may not come. But people who are looking for happiness as if that's their life goal end up being very unhappy. But people who choose something meaningful as their life goal, it may happen that happiness comes as a byproduct. And that whole idea was for me and my students and for all of us, a kind of critique of consumer culture, where every advertisement we see tells us the name of the game is to be something called happy. That's what we're supposed to look for. That's what we're supposed to find. And in one fell swoop, Viktor Frankl said, it's not his experience. Those that take happiness as their primary goal usually don't find it at all and end up being very unhappy, or don't have a lasting happiness of any kind, but pursue meaning. So that's the first point I want to make. Second point I want to make, I used to use a book called The World's Religions by Houston Smith. And it was a great book. I think one of us here, Eileen, I don't know if you had that world religion course with me and read Houston Smith or not, but I used it so many years. And Houston Smith tried to approach each religion empathically. So as he approached Hinduism, he tried to make the case for Hinduism. Buddhism, make the case for Buddhism. Islam, make the case for Islam. Christianity, Judaism, you name it. And he would look for a slogan to kind of capture something of what he took to be the essence of a given tradition. And when he got to Judaism, the phrase that he used was a passion for meaning. Not being at one with God, not perpetual peace, but a passion for meaning. And I must say that's something that I have seen in the Jewish tradition and in my Jewish friends many, many times, in many, many ways. Now, of course, Christians and Baha'is and Hindus and Buddhists, they can like meaning too. But our Jewish sisters and brothers, at least from Houston Smith's perspective, that's one thing we really can learn. I can, from that heritage. Another thing that I've experienced, and I don't know about you, but I have, is that we don't just discover meaning, we create meaning. Meaning's not just something given to us in a package. It's something you might say, rest in the sense of W-R-E-S-T, wrestle out of life. Circumstances happen. Sometimes we wish they didn't happen. Sometimes they're tragic. And we really have no option. We can die, we can give up, or we can try to wrest some meaning from them. Not happiness, not satisfaction, not saying, oh, it was meant to be, not saying, oh, it was all part of God's plan. But by God, whatever happens, we can create meaning as best we can. And the process of creating meaning is itself a process. It's not like you do it once and it's over. You know, got it, now I'll move on. No, you have to keep going. You have to recreate meaning again and again. And whatever meaning you create, it will change. The meaning itself will change. Now, this can sound real abstract, but I don't mean for it to be at all. I don't think there's a soul in our group right now that hasn't undergone tragedy of some sort, maybe many times. Abuse, death, disease, you name it. And if not to you, then to someone else, which a lot of times can hurt a lot more. And you can't look at it and say it was meant to be. At least I don't think you can. But maybe you can find some meaning from it or make some meaning out of it. A kind of creative transformation. So that's about all that my wife, Kathy, and I could come up with last night. For the life of us, we couldn't define meaning, but we sure know that we liked it. And we sure knew we had to create it sometimes, lots of times. And we sure knew that it's a process. So here are my questions for us. There's 3 of them. Take your pick. Can you think of events in your life which were meaningful, but not happy? Number 2, does your own experience support Viktor Frankl's idea that sometimes seeking happiness is the worst thing you can do? And number 3, are you in a process of meaning making now, today? Out of what? Because meaning making is always in a context. It's out of something. Given this circumstance, here I go. So let's just open it up. Let's start with number 2, if you don't mind. Do you agree with Frankl that seeking happiness is actually not such a great goal?
I think as a Jew, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. As a Jew, I have a slightly different take. I think that what stands out to me about Judaism is that it's about the action. So when he says take a meaning, do something meaningful, I think the operative word is do. I have often done something because it just seemed like the only thing I could do, or it seemed like the best thing to do, not taking an action just to do something. I don't mean that, but it's like I'm in a situation and someone needs help and I just do it or whatever. And I don't really understand the meaning of it until much later. So I think the important thing is the action, is the doing that makes the difference.
Makes sense to all of us, I bet. Sure does to me, and thanks for bringing that up. Eileen.
Yeah, I feel like laughing and crying at the same time, just listening to your talk this morning. When I read Frankel's book, I couldn't imagine having to wake up in that situation every single day. And, the importance of shoes and not being able to have, it was, but I know in my own life, like when tragedies, and you're right, everybody has tragedies. We don't get through this life without it. And every time I say, oh, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to get up and do what I need to do today because I just can't do it. And I get up and do it. And then I feel this sense of meaning because usually somebody else is helped by that, which helps me. And so I do think searching for happiness is maybe not the best path, but it sure would be nice if it worked.
It's a nice byproduct when it comes. I think no one will flee from it.
And it is. I mean, this has been Easter, for me in my Christian tradition, Easter has been this weekend, and it has been so full of, after going through all of this thinking, I've been meditating on, I know this sounds horrible, but crucifixion, and just I can't imagine the pain, and I hope I never know that, but the things that we do to each other without, and I think, for all the wrong reasons, we torture each other. Like, I don't mean that flippantly, and when I know I'm being called to do something and I don't do it, I always regret it. And even though I fight and say, I'm not going to do this, and I go and do it, it always brings something, even if that's just joy to others or to myself or whatever. So that's it.
I think Deb's notion of it's in the doing, that was really helpful. It's not just in the thinking. It's in the doing. It was very interesting. Jennifer. I thought you had your hand up. Yeah, no. Okay, sorry. Anybody else want to speak to this question of meaning making and its relation to happiness? Oh, Dan, go ahead. Sorry.
I've always thought of happiness as a feeling, and feelings are ephemeral and they're conditional. And if you contrast happiness with joy, joy is an internal sense of well-being that arises from within, whereas happiness is dependent on external circumstances. And we can't control external circumstances, but we can control our inner life. And so if we're pursuing happiness, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment because we can't control it. I don't think there's anything wrong with happiness. I think it is a delightful feeling to have, but it does result from good deeds that we do. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? We're on meaning and happiness and the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of meaning, the creation of meaning. Anybody else want to say anything? One of the things that our discussion has involved, and I took us in this direction, was creating meaning out of the suffering or tragedy, a difficulty. But we can also create meaning out of joy. We can create meaning out of happy things too. My wife and I have just discovered that we're going to be grandparents. And we have sons 31 and 35. And I can tell you, I'm ready, but my wife was really ready. And happiness has indeed been a byproduct. in her case, in my case too, but I think hers. But that reminds me that that's an occasion of where you can sense a something that's more than you, that's kind of beautiful. And there's a kind of hope to it. There's a hope to it. And I think we just remember that meaning making and meaning discovery can emerge out of blessings as well as curses, happy experiences as well as sad experiences. Crucifixions, yes, but also resurrections, to use the language of Christianity. It's really both sides of things. All right, we're going to turn to nurturing unless anybody else wants to say something. Jenny, you want to say something? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, really quickly. Back in 2011, we had a NDP party leader die, Jack Layton, and he was like bringing hope. He was talking about, you know, hope is better than despair, and he was really quite a good leader. He died of cancer just before, I think, an election. And it was really poignant for a lot of people who are forward thinking, progressive, that kind of thing. At his funeral, the minister was meaning making for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that so strongly as a minister who'd been in the ministry for 9 years at that point. Just that's what we try to do for people on the regular, you know, like we sit with scripture, we live scripture, then we try to make meaning and connections between, you know, our daily lives and the scripture for people. Do they have any sense that they are living in that kind of way as well? But I felt that really strongly. And it's whenever I go into a difficult Sunday, and thankfully after 20 years of ministry, they're fewer and farther between, but definitely lots in the beginning. I think what they're looking for me is meaning making. That's what they want to hear. Do they want exegesis on a scripture? Maybe. Some people do, maybe. But ultimately, why is my life the way it is, and how can I live better? Or what is God calling me to that I haven't understood yet? That kind of meaning making, I think, is really, really powerful. And I'd say it is, as you're saying, in the burdens and in the joys, but everywhere in between as well. You know, making meaning out of all of it. That's certainly what the Broussards, I've been using the books for a couple of years, and in it they say constantly try to discover the significance of your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know that people want information gathering.
Yeah.
They want meaning making.
Yeah.
When they come to you, they could get the information from books, the internet, whatever.
Yeah.
But they're turning to you. Can you help me find some meaning? Dan.
Just one more quick thing. I get a little challenged around meaning because we, as you mentioned, ascribe meaning. And sometimes the meaning we give to what other people say or do is not what they intended.
Mm-hmm.
And it can often be very negative to ourselves. For instance, a father can look crossly at his son and say, I didn't like what you did. And the child can come away with the meaning, my father doesn't like me. There's something wrong with me. And that feeling can persist on into adulthood if it's a pattern. And so we can grow up with a feeling of being not okay. And we have to re-examine the meaning that we've given to critical events in our lives and reassess them and give new meaning to them so we can move forward with a positive approach. So it reminds me of what Scott Peck said in The Road Less Traveled about the difference between honesty and truthfulness, because I thought they were synonymous. But he says, honesty is the ability to directly and straightforwardly say what you're thinking, feeling, and believing. And truthfulness is a commitment to finding truth such that you take what you honestly feel, believe, hold it up for examination and ask, is it true? Because it might not be true. And so I think it's the same way with our meanings.
Yeah.
We have to review them. Thank you.
I think of dogs, if I can use a funny example. My dog is quite meaningful to me. But my dog also has value in himself, in herself. I have two dogs. And the meaning they have is not what I assign to them. They transcend that. And actually, so do people.
Mhm.
So need to be careful with meaning. It's a good thing, but things can have value and beauty quite apart from any meaning assigned to them. How about two more remarks, Martha and Eileen, and then or anybody else that hasn't spoken. Martha, you go first, and then we'll turn to nurturing. Martha, go ahead.
So I live in Little Rock, and my mother, who lived to be 89, lived in Marvel, which is about an hour and a half's drive from in between the two. And my sister was dying, and I would pick mom up and we would drive, and she would start telling all these stories as cars passed us. And it would irritate me. I mean, she was making up all these stories, and I would go, Mama, what are you talking about? And I didn't get it. And now that she's gone, the meaning is powerful.
Yeah. Martha, I work with people with Alzheimer's a lot myself, and I have family members with Alzheimer's, so I kind of know it pretty well. And I know that when they tell stories, it's irrelevant whether it happened or not. That's irrelevant. It's that it means something to them. And that's good enough for me. And so to adjust and see that what means something to somebody else is in a way the heart of the matter in sometimes. So,
And she was
okay,
also
Eileen, and then we're going to
trying
turn
to
to nurturance. Oh, go ahead, Martha.
She was just trying to make meaning out of things also.
Yeah.
To come up with a positive story. They were always delightful. I was just too anxious to understand them. Understand the meaning.
Way to go. Eileen, last comment, then nurturance.
Okay, I just want to say real fast, and this is kind of off a little bit from where we've been talking, but I've been part of a group for the last 3 years called Becoming Beloved Community, that's through our church, and it's nationwide. And what we've been struggling with is racism, basically. And when I first started the group, I was like, well, I've lived in other countries, I'm very open, whatever. And it's been a real learning process for me because, I am, and all of these little ways that I just didn't realize I was doing really made an impact on people. And I was completely oblivious to that. So we just had a NAACP race walk run at this weekend, and it was absolutely beautiful. And the irony of it is it was the majority of white people that were there, and the people running it were the people of color, and they were so open and grateful. And speaking of grandkids, we took our grandkids and we met up with other friends, and it was just this most, loving experience. And I have a long ways to go, but I'm just sharing this because I thought I was one way, and I learned over time, I've got a lot to learn. And that is meaningful. It's meaningful not only to me, but people who are different and are treated different just because of the way they look.
Yeah. Maybe meaning is, I think remember Jesus said, not my will, but thy will, O Lord, in the Garden of Gethsemane. That slogan's helpful. You can say, not my meaning, but your meaning. And so it's not my meaning. It's your meaning that I want to know about. that I want to be affected by, that I want to internalize as best I can. And that's a relational thing, but it's focused on them. And particularly
Well
matters
said.
of race and class and gender. Not my meaning, but your meaning. Okay, let's turn to nurturance. I was a little surprised to hear what the Brusset said here, and I'm going to read it to you, and let's see what it gives us. A spiritual journey is usually considered to be a movement toward community, but an essential loop of our route must pass through the realm of the self. We have to find out who we are before we can make commitments to others. We have to care about our own souls in order to have the energy and strength to care for our families, our neighbors, our communities, the earth. And then they say there are many ways to practice nurturing, and then they go over some ways that being a lifelong learner, studying can be a form of nurturing. Keeping the Sabbath, a form of nurturance. Dedicating time to leisure, a form of nurturance. But what surprised me was that they focused on soul nurturance rather than what I expected was nurturing others or nurturing the earth or nurturing children or nurturing plants. They focused actually on soul nurturance first. And I didn't know what to make of that. So I'm going to start there and ask all of you, how important to you do you think soul nurturance is? And can you think of things that you do that you would consider healthy soul nurturance? And can you share, would anybody be willing to share with the group? Healthy soul nurturance. Jennifer? Unmute.
You correctly, but for me, it's critical. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's minimum of a 9, and it needs to happen every day. Because I don't think when I was raised that I was raised with a complete or full understanding of the fact that I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And as I've come to understand that, I'm looking for my development spiritually for the next world as I struggle here. So when I've assigned meaning, my meaning, to backtrack just a smidge, is what is God trying to get me to understand by whatever is happening at this moment in this time, and how do I grow through it or with it, even joy or pain, either way. So for me, I think the ways that I go about it are quiet time, our prayer, our moments of gratitude, looking at my lilies that are coming up out of the soil right now, anticipation of their beauty. It's such a gift. All the things I cherish in this world from God, giving it the value that it deserves, is a part of soul nurturance for me. And so when I think about and I really hope I understood it correctly, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking.
I think you got it. I think you got it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer.
I can remember the very first moment that I understood the necessity and the okayness of taking care of myself. I was a single mom. I was working awful hours. I never took any time for myself. And even when I was younger, I did not have good examples of positive taking time for yourself that was not at the expense of others. It was payday. It was payday at the hospital. And a nurse that I worked with, who was much younger than I was, she was showing off what she had bought with her paycheck. And I said, "You bought something for yourself?"
Mm.
And she said, "That is the first thing I do with my paycheck. I worked hard for this money. I always get something for myself first." And it was just such a concept to me. It wasn't necessarily buying something with my paycheck, but that gave me permission to do for myself. And it's grown since then. It's something I've taught to my daughters, I've taught to my son, and they tell me that they learned it from me. And they're better at it than I am.
Hmm. Thanks, Deb. Anybody else? I think we're on the question of soul nurturance now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd be interesting to, what do you do? What form does that take? Just to share. Anybody else want to share? Kim.
Well, I was just thinking about this because it come up, and I do try to follow those ways of nurturing myself, and a lot of it seems like has had, coming from the body, bringing the body. But this past week, I do things, but then, I haven't made them a regular habit, and I feel need to bring things into a habit and make them a part of an automaticity in my things. And so I have my Alexa set up, and she warns me at 5 till 10 that my little exercise thing, stretching exercise thing, will start at 10. And so now I've used that as my cue to, after I finish the brief stretching thing, to do my meditation time in the morning. And then I learned from this Goldie Hawn has this mental health for children in the schools, and it's quite good. And they use brain breaks, they call it, for the kids, 10-minute brain breaks. And so I wanted to make it more than once a day. And so now at 1 o'clock, I have another setting, and that reminds me, and I get up and I go take my walk. And then I come back and I do my second meditation for the day at 1.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
I hope so. I hope so.
For sure.
I hope so. Martha?
Well, I was fortunate to grow up in a farm family, and I think that we nurtured each other. It was a rhythm, an agricultural rhythm, along with the Jewish holidays. But we would watch Daddy come in and sneeze soybean dust for hours. So when winter came, we all got to relax. So we nurtured each other, and that was soul nurturing. And I grew up from that perspective of waking up every morning and singing Ma Tovu O Alecha Yaakov, how lovely are thy tents, O house of Jacob. And that is the point in the morning that I'm nurtured, and it takes me through the day.
Anybody else? Thank you, Martha, so much. One thing to think about just for a moment as we're here, and I'm going to turn to another subject quickly on nurturance. Maybe some of you know, I may have mentioned it, that I'm a lay associate, or an oblate, it's what they call it, O-B-L-A-T-E, in a Benedictine community in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And there are 20 or 30 sisters now there. It's a woman's community. And I try to follow their prayer life as best I can and go up periodically. But they had a tradition. They said, if you ask them, what are they about? They said, we're about service, we're about prayer, and we're about holy play. Holy play. And I said, well, what do you do to play? And most of these women now are in their between 60 and 90. And they said in the old days, we'd play soccer. And we wore our habits. And so we'd go out to the field in Fort Smith. We had a big field by our community, and we would play soccer. And you can imagine people driving by, they knew it was funny looking. People driving by and looking up at this field, and there are these Catholic sisters in habits playing soccer. Now, as they grew older and they couldn't be mobile like that, they still were committed to holy play. And I said, what do you do now? And they said, we watch NBA games, National Basketball Association games, and we cheer for different teams. And so this raises the concept, I think, are simple forms of recreation also potentially forms of soul nurturance. What's the role of holy play in soul nurturance? Anybody have a thought? Anybody have a form of holy play you'd like to share? Sandy. Sandy, you're muted.
My dad had a lot of advice for us 5 children growing up. But the one thing that I always took with me is that you need to work hard all your life and play harder.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that because when I was a teenager, I thought everything was play. Even going to school was play. It was fun. But when my daughter, a second child, contracted, well, she ended up having a disease called opsoclonus myoclonus syndrome, and she could no longer walk, talk, see, swallow, all those type things. There was a therapist that was at my house, and she came and sat on the couch next to me and put her arms on my shoulders, and she said, nobody is going to be taken care of in this family unless you take care of yourself. And she said, I'm serious. I'm dead serious. And I took her as that. So now I work on what I call the carrot system. I will work, I will do all the things that need to be done, all the adult responsibilities, but to soul search, to soul revive, I plan something at least 3 or 4 months out. My next thing is camping and floating the mulberry sometime in May. And that's the way I think about it. It nurtures my soul. We talk about nurturing the soul, but it also is play. It's the playful part that really will take away all the stressors, all the non-meaning things that don't matter in this life, really comes down to it. But comes into us to feed my soul, to nurture me, to be out in nature. And I think that is my way of being, having my play.
And to look forward to possibilities for holy play.
Right.
Many people, that's nourishment itself, to know that one can come. I want to turn the topic a bit in a wider social horizon. So just know that that's coming, and I'm kind of watching the clock. So be brief so that I can make sure that I can get to this next topic, if that's okay. But Dan and Eileen, go ahead. Just go ahead. No? Oh, your hand's up, Eileen. That's why.
No, I was just going to say, we're going to Camp Mitchell. I don't know, those of you from Little Rock know, this weekend, and that's going to be I think that's going to be something that'll be very meaningful. So
Holy play.
Holy play. That's right. Hiking.
Yeah. See, prayer and play go together.
And
Holy-
centering prayer saved my life, by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah. Dan.
I have a grandson in Washington area, DC, who's 11 years old. And I have another son who lives in Sweden, and he has an 11-year-old son. And each of these boys has an 11-year-old cousin. A while ago, because we're all in disparate places, I set up a Zoom call and called it Grandpa's Cousins Club. And we did things like learning how to tie knots and what are the safety rules for a penknife? How can you carve in soap? But we also talked about values and virtues. And we talked about feelings and how we experience them. And we had so much fun. I really felt that was my holy play.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Sometimes we don't associate fun with spirituality, but it can be in great ways. Okay, I'm going to shift gears, and this may or may not work, but I need to turn to politics and American culture. Are you ready? And by the way, if this fails, so be it. It's only 10 minutes. So all things pass, and that can include this. But one of my colleagues at Hendrix College has done a lot of work in political culture in America and globally. And it's pretty solid research. In other words, it's not just, gee, it looks this way to me. They've done surveys around the world. And it's been in the context of the rise of authoritarian impulses politically around the globe. And that includes America. And one thing that they discovered is that there are two prevailing worldviews, visions of reality that are part of people's lives. And one of them focuses on rules and reward and punishment, and people need to get what they deserve, and law and order, and the kind of stability that brings in their minds. And the other focuses on nurturance and non-coercion, and not exactly fixed on rules, and not thematizing everything in terms of reward and punishment. And they trace these worldviews. They call that first one authoritative because it emphasizes authority. And they call the second one nurturant because it emphasizes nurturance. And they actually trace those to images of parenting styles early in life. And you can be, or you can have a parent who leans toward the authoritarian, or a parent who leans toward the nurturant. Now, there are gradations, but there is a genuine leaning. And my colleague, his name is John Sanders, he called it authoritative, not authoritarian, because he was really trying to find a way of naming this in a way that they would recognize. Yes, we are interested in these things. John Sanders is also a theologian, and he recognized that people's images of God also can lean in those directions. And so, people's intuition of God, it may be deeply authoritarian or authoritative. God is a king on a throne. God is a Lord. And if you think about that, that's a political metaphor. God is the chief. God is the boss. God is the one who is in control and should be in control. God is sovereign. In the other image, it's God as gentle spirit. God is love. God is on the side of life. God as tender. It's almost like that other group imagines God on the analogy of a nurse. And if you think of a nurse is not in the business of control, or reward and punishment, but in the business of nurturance. And not necessarily all powerful. A nurse cannot make everything happen, but a nurse can always be there. And so you've got these two images of God and these two worldviews and these two images of parenting. And John Sanders' thesis is that that's actually what lies beneath the polarization today in our culture and in so many cultures. It's different worldviews, different images of the divine, even different images of what parenting should look like. I wanted to share that with you, just because I, like all of us, am trying to understand what's going on in the world today. Does that raise any thoughts for you? Does that seem right or not right?
I heard a Catholic priest called Father Leo who spoke sort of to that. And the gist of his talk was, show me the kind of God a person has, and I will tell you who that person is. Yeah.
That's the spirit of it, Deb. Yeah.
It's very deep.
Yeah, that's the spirit of it.
But it's really
Viv.
interesting because in
Let Viv had her hand up. Go ahead, Viv, first.
Yeah, Jay, part of what's going on for me with that is thinking about spiral dynamics and other adult development models, which talk about transcending and including what came before. So in those models, that authoritative is one place, and it's possible to become more complex and go to this other nurturance thing. And there's strong correlation between how one was raised and what one's predominance is, and whether one grows from the one to the other in some point in time.
Thank you. Thank you. Tim.
Well, this kind of struck a chord with me because I've worked in child abuse my career. And we always made a more of a distinction, I think, between authoritarian and authoritative. And they're more of like three separate. But I see where you know that's going on that spectrum. And I guess I always trying to find synthesis, I think. And I can see, you know, value in and possibly this, I don't know, this spiral theory that she was speaking of, but that, you know, there's value in some rules, and there's value in nurturing. How do you bring those things together in a way? But I have spent my entire life standing between families, children, and women, against authoritarianism
Mhm.
and beliefs and worldviews. And so I make a really strong, boundary there between an authoritarian parenting history or style and an authoritative and nurturing approach.
Yeah. Kim, just to be fair to John Sanders and the work that's done, and it comes out of political science, by the way, so he's a theologian borrowing from research in political science. And so that's the empirical part. But he draws a distinction between permissive parenting and nurturing parenting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so he thinks nurturant parenting does have rules.
So that might be the kind of the middle ground between
Right.
authoritative and permissive.
Yeah, yeah. And I think Dan asked, are there truly poles? And I think John Sanders thinks that the evidence suggests that there really are the poles. They really do exist in people's minds and hearts. Eileen.
Yeah, I just want to share something quickly because there were 5 of us children. Now 3 of them are gone. And my brother and I are incredibly at different sides of this.
Yeah.
But we grew up with the same parents,
Yeah.
So I've always been, I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there because it sounds like what you're saying, and I have not read this book. So I guess.
Yeah. And I see Nita. Yeah, I understand that question too. Nita notes Sanders is spot on. So much of the move toward an authoritative leaning is fear-based. If fear can be heard and addressed with with options and offer nurturance, it may be possible to give more understanding and meaning. Oh, no, that's Lynn. Lynn says that. Sorry. Thank you, Lynn.
Well, and the other thing is, it's like with all the polarization we've had with Trump, I never thought that I would be so far removed from my family.
I think we'll just have to leave this with those questions. I don't think that that I can resolve it, but it is something to think about. And I think that when Deb said, or quoted the person, tell me how a person conceives of God and I'll tell you who the person is. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. That the images of God do, in fact, support or not support patterns of behavior as well. All right, with that in mind, Sandy, you close us. See you next time, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for coming today. I think today's discussions were wonderful. Nurturing and meaning. Of course, it hits very close to home with me. I hope that you will take the rest, whatever you've heard today, and take it through the rest of the days in the week where we can come back together, which will be 1 week from today at noon Central Daylight Time. We're going to be doing O for openness and S for silence. And with that, I wish you all peace, shalom, salam, and have a great week. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.